I'm happy to welcome Xandi, who is joining us by Skype. Xandi, please share your story whenever you're ready.
Hi. So my name is Xandi. I am in Montgomery, Alabama, and I had an abortion about 3 years ago. I found myself in a very dangerous, abusive relationship, um, and I was pregnant. Um, and my um, abuser at the time was using the pregnancy to try to control me. Um, he would say things like, I'm going to make sure that you never see your kid, or I'll uh, I'll tell them this or that about you, and you'll never see your child. Um, and he knew that I was also physically vulnerable as well, and so um, he began to get more and more violent once he found out I was pregnant. Because he thought that that was a way he could control me. And I made a decision one day. I called my grandmother and I said, I can't. There's no way that I want to be in any way attached to this person for any amount of time, and I can't raise a child with him, and I won't. And so she said, I'll help you however I can. I got on Google and I did a search for reproductive health and abortion providers. And I ended up accidentally going to a crisis pregnancy center before I found an actual abortion center in my town. Um, and they offered me absolutely no medical advice. They wouldn't refer me um, to a provider. They wouldn't even tell me if there was one in town. And they gave me a set of crochet baby booties and a rubber fetus that they said they had prayed over my baby. And they offered me all sorts of religious advice, and they told me that I should marry my abuser, um, and that if I didn't marry him, that I was going to go to hell because I would then be having a child out of wedlock, which was against their religious standards. Um, so I did another Google search, and thankfully, I was able to find reproductive health services here in Montgomery, Alabama. And had I not been able to find an abortion provider here in town, that close to where I live, they're only about 2 miles from my home. There's no way I could have had an abortion in secret at the time. There's no way I could have done that without him finding out. So what I ended up doing is I was able to go to the clinic on my lunch break one day and complete the mandatory counseling. Um, in Alabama, you have to have this what they call counseling, but it's actually misinformation that the state mandates that the providers give to women. They told me a lot of the same things that the Crisis Pregnancy Center told me, but they prefaced it with, the state requires me to tell you this. Um, and then I waited the mandatory waiting period. It was 24 hours at the time, but because I went on a Friday, I had to wait until the following Monday, I think, to have my procedure. And I just pretended I was going to work early that morning, and I went to the clinic instead of to my office. And he didn't find out until I was safely away from him. Um, but I will say that the one of the protesters at the clinic tried to take my photo when I was walking in, and I've since found out that this man takes photos of all the women who go in if he can, and he tries to put them on all of his social media accounts, on his blog. He makes these YouTube videos of photo reels of all of the women, and he tries to shame them. And had he been able to capture my photo that day, he would have put my life in danger. I was doing this in secret for my own safety. Um, and he shouted at me. He seems to think that women um, only need privacy because they feel guilty about their decision. Um, And I have since actually had a conversation with him because I now volunteer at that abortion clinic where we use rainbow colored umbrellas to block the protesters from taking photos of the women. And to my knowledge, they have not been putting any photos of women on social media now. And it is entirely legal for them to take photos, but it's also entirely legal for me to carry a giant, oversized umbrella in the broad sunlight and make sure he doesn't get anybody's faces in his photos. So that's most of my story. I've never regretted my decision. It was the only way that I could have escaped that abusive relationship without having to. If that clinic hadn't been here in town, I would probably be co-parenting with my ex-abuser right now. And I can't imagine what that would be like. I know there are women out there who end up having to do those things because they either didn't have the geographical privilege I had to be able to go to a clinic that close to home in secret, or they didn't have the funds. I was fortunate enough that I was able to pay the cash for the procedure. Um, and I was able to get out of that relationship and go back to school. I went to graduate school and I studied the Hyde Amendment in my master's program. And I found out through studying that I had another privilege that Medicaid patients don't have, which is I can get a birth control prescription from my abortion provider on my way out, and I can go to fill it at any pharmacy. Whereas Medicaid patients have to have a Medicaid provider write their prescription, and the um, the providers at this particular clinic have no incentive to become Medicaid providers because they don't do any services other than abortion. So, and that's not covered because of the Hyde Amendment. So, um, Medicaid patients are then left vulnerable to another unexpected pregnancy. Um, and I can see how all of these different factors, the poverty, the lack of proper birth control or contraceptive method, and someone who might be living in a violent or abusive situation, um, that's a recipe for disaster. And I'm very, very fortunate that I was able to obtain an abortion when I needed one, and very grateful to the staff over there. And I really enjoy volunteering, and I'm glad to be a part of the fight for reproductive justice.
Xandi, thank you so much for sharing your story and for becoming an activist for people just like you.